Over 100 people die in Syria today, and the bombing targets eastern Ghouta and Old Homs.
قصف عشوائي على أحياء مدينة حمص.
تفتناز تصاعد أسهم دخان من مطار العسكري.
The Free Syrian Army destroys many helicopters in Taftanaz airport, and the regime forces bomb residential areas and invade Jericho.
قصف مدينة 29/8/2012.
Oglu says that his country will discuss housing refugees inside Syria for the United Nations. Welcome to Orient TV English News Bulletin. Over 100 victims were killed in Syria today. According to the Syrian Human Rights Network, 51 of them fell in Damascus and its countryside, where the regime forces executed 5 men in the neighborhood of Jobar, as well as the bombing that targeted eastern Ghouta. Meanwhile, 2 victims fell in the town of Al-Buwaida, which witnessed violent clashes between Al-Assad regime forces and the Free Syrian Army. Also, a victim fell in Arbin, and several were injured in Kafar Batna due to the bombing that targeted the city, while the shelling with missiles that renewed on Mu'addamiyat al-Sham and Jisrin, while the regime forces stormed the town of Zamalka, and in Azabadani, several victims fell wounded, while the residents were unable to rescue them due to the heavy bombardment.
قصف عنيف على حي جوبر دمشق والأدخل المتصاعدة من هناك.
The capital, Damascus, and its suburbs are still burning under the regime's fire and constant bombing that targeted many neighborhoods and cities where the sniper bullets of the regime are still savaging citizens there. The series of the destruction and killing started in the city of Azabadani. Here, the helicopters did not stop for a second its bombing, which pounded every single area and corner of the city, especially the bombing that was launched from security barriers, where at least 5 mortar shells a minute would fall on the city's properties. The number of victims is increasing as well, as the dozens of the injuries that are caused daily, some of whom are in a critical condition due to the deteriorating medical situation and the shortage of medical supplies and equipment to treat citizens. This fact caused the massive displacement of citizens towards safer places. A serious drastic humanitarian situation was caused after the massive destruction that was caused in the city. Vengeance and grudges are shown in the regime's actions here in Saqba, after the regime targeted with its tanks and helicopters everything in the neighborhood. The bombing reached civilians and even teachers in schools. Even mosques were also targeted by the regime's brutality, where the Shabiha forces burned Al-Kabir Mosque in Al-Qabun in addition to Al-Rahma Mosque in Jobar and turned it into absolute black ash. In Damascus suburbs, the towns of eastern Ghouta witnessed fierce military campaigns that was launched by the regime's helicopters and MiG planes. The same scene is also repeated in Mu'addamiyat al-Sham after the regime's snipers penetrated people's safe homes and also targeted animals and farms. The snipers of the regime are ready to kill anytime and any place, and the Free Syrian Army is also ready to retaliate to the regime's tanks and planes, where lately it destroyed 3 security barriers and killed many of its troops near Al-Hikma Center and Al-Jala Street. To that, the anti-government protests continue in Harasta, where the protesters, as always, demanded freedom and the overthrow of Al-Assad's regime.
In the province of Idlib, 19 victims were killed by Al-Assad regime forces, 3 of them in Ma'arat al-Nu'man, as the regime forces stormed the city of Jericho after the withdrawal of the Free Army from it due to the campaigns of arrests and the burning of houses, and also reports of field executions. Meanwhile, the cities in the towns of Taftanaz, Ben Nish and Tu'um witnessed artillery fire this morning with the flight of the MiG fighter jets. From their side, the Free Syrian Army battalions have attacked Taftanaz military airport, destroying at least 10 helicopters and several buildings within the airport. They also bombed using mortar Abu Duhur military airport and the Nairab camp, also a factory that was near Saraqib. To that, Idlib witnessed the death of 30 victims yesterday, according to the Syrian Human Rights Network.
تفتناز تصاعد أسنة دخان من المطار العسكري في البلدة بعد قصفه من قبل كتائب أحرار الشام.
As a retaliation to the massacres committed by the regime forces in Idlib and the rest of the Syrian provinces, the Free Syrian Army carried out an exceptional operation that targeted Taftanaz military airport that serves as a base for the regime's helicopters in northern Syria. And according to initial reports, the Free Syrian Army was able to destroy at least 10 helicopters and damage the airport's buildings. The operation was followed with bombing the security barriers that surrounded the area where the regime forces are positioned, along with its artillery and mortars that bombs the cities and residential areas.
قصف مدينة 29/8/2012.
The regime's retaliation came through the military planes that bombed residential areas in the cities and towns of Taftanaz, Tu'um, and Binnish, in addition to Saraqib, which caused the destruction of several houses, injuring and killing dozens of civilians. The bombing continued as well in Jabal al-Zawiya, where the regime forces launched mortar shells on the villages of Der Sumbul, Ahsum, and Mar'ayan. Meanwhile, the town of Bshariya and Najis al-Shughur, along with Ma'arat al-Na'man and Ma'ar Shariyun, Al-Ghatfa, and Ma'asiran, were also targeted amid disconnection of electricity, communication, and medical assistance. This comes at a time where the citizens of Kafr Ruma held a funeral for one of their victims who was killed due to his injuries.
In the city of Al-Qasir in Homs, 9 members of the regime forces defected with their weapons from one of the checkpoints stationed on the Lebanese border, while the city witnessed heavy shelling, while the regime forces dumped several barrels of explosives that led to the destruction of several houses. Meanwhile, the old neighborhoods of Homs are being exposed to heavy shelling that led to the fall of several victims, including women and children. And explosions rocked the city with heavy fire from heavy machine guns by regime forces stationed around Al-Khalidiyya neighborhood, while the citizens launched appeals for help in light of the lack of medical supplies and food as a result of the ongoing siege on this city.
أحياء مدينة حمص 28/8/2012. الله أكبر.
In Latakia, the regime and its Shabiha forces continue to spread in the neighborhoods of Al-Sheikh Dahir, Al-Qusur, and on the outskirts of Al-Raml neighborhood, which was followed by arrests and robbing campaigns. Meanwhile, the military campaigns continue on the villages and towns of Mount Kurds and the city of Al-Hiffa, where many were killed and injured, in addition to the massive destruction. Furthermore, the destruction also reached the villages of Al-Turkman mountain that are still being bombed by the government forces. And coming up later in the bulletin, Bashar al-Assad says that talking about a buffer zone is not realistic. Welcome back. You're watching Orient TV English News Bulletin. Moving on to Daraa, where many civilians were murdered and wounded in Khirbat Ghazali due to Al-Assad regime's shelling on the area, while many others were wounded in the town of Al-Mata'iyah when Al-Assad regime forces targeted families fleeing to some areas in Jordan. Also, heavy artillery pounded the city of Da'al, while many were wounded by Al-Assad regime's indiscriminate shelling, which targeted the town of Naimi. And on the other hand, the town of Tasil was surrounded by the regime's security forces and militia men from all sides, with the attempt of many citizens in the town to flee the dreadful military operations to be executed.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بيان صادر عن تجمع حرائر سوريا
Meanwhile, a group of Syrian women rally under the name of the Free Syrians to defend women's rights inside and outside Syria.
في ظل العصابة الأسدية نعلن عن تشكيل تجمع حرائر سوريا لنساهم مساهمة فعالة في ثورة الحرية والكرامة ليكون لنا قدم صدق في مضمار هذه الثورة.
In Aleppo, Al Amiriya district witnessed violent clashes between the regime's army and Al Tawheed battalion of the Free Syrian Army, while Masakin Hanano witnessed bombardment by the regime forces. Shelling also targeted the districts of Bustan al-Basha, Al-Ida'a and Al-Misar, along with the eastern neighborhoods of the city. And in the countryside of Aleppo, the town of Al-Tawama was targeted with bombing with the 46th Regiment of the regime's army, where the residential neighborhoods in Tel Rifat were also hit with artillery bombardment from Minnig military airport. Activists broadcasted those clips leaked from inside the regime's army tanks, showing soldiers pointing their guns at civilian houses and deliberately targeting them.
حلب دير حافر 28/8/2012.
Also, the battalion of the Free Syrian Army found a large amount of gas masks and chemical weapons in the area of Deir Hafir in the outskirts of Aleppo, as these pictures show.
كبيرة من الكمامات قام بتوزيعها على المقرات الحكومية لاستخدامها في حال.
In the province of Hama, tank shelling targeted the village of Atoba, forcing residents to flee into the neighboring regions. In addition, the city of Al-Tamina and the surrounding areas of Mount Shahshabo were under heavy artillery bombardment, which led to numerous wounded victims.
انظروا يا عرب إلى كتاب الله. انظروا أمام المجيد.
In Deir ez-Zor, 2 murdered victims were recorded from one family, and a number of wounded victims fell following heavy shelling that targeted the 2 districts of Al-Jubaila and Al-Ba'ajin. Also, more than 5 civilians were wounded by Al-Assad regime missiles on Al-Bukamal and Al-Kanadiyya, also placed between the regime's army and members of the Syrian army in the area. Meanwhile, the city of Al-Muhassan experienced the overflight of the regime warplanes, accompanied by consecutive sounds of massive explosions.
وهذه حضانة للأطفال تابعة لهذه المدرسة.
And coming up in the bulletin, Bashar al-Assad says that talking about a buffer zone is not realistic. With the increase in number of murdered, wounded and displaced Syrian citizens due to the escalation of the regime forces' military campaigns on most of Syrian cities and towns, the international community has been making many vital movements. The most important being is in Tehran, which is receiving delegations from the members of the non-aligned summit to discuss solutions concerning the Syrian crisis, which is spiraling about out of the control day by day.
Coinciding with the destruction the regime helicopters have done following an assault by the Free Syrian Army on Taftanaz military airport in Idlib, a Dunya channel rushed excerpts from a taped interview with Bashar al-Assad in an attempt to create calmness between the regime's foundations. He had described in this interview the buffer zone which was spoken about before regarding its inexistence, where he felt the situation is better than before with the need for more time to resolve. For its part, Moscow announced that it does not need to end its military presence in Syria in conjunction with invitations to the United Nations to establish a buffer zone inside Syria. In addition, Turkey had recently pressured for the creation of buffer zones for Syrian refugees after the number has increased in an unprecedented way, which led to pursue their welcoming until the completion of the construction of new camps. This came after the French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius called the neighboring countries of Syria to participate in a meeting of the UN Security Council, which will be held in New York on Thursday, specified concerning humanitarian assistance. And news sources confirmed the non-participation of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of the United States Hillary Clinton at the Security Council's meeting.
In another matter, the French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said that the establishment of buffer zones in Syria, as suggested by President François Hollande, is very complex and requires the establishment of a partial no-fly zone. Fabius told France on the radio if refugees gathered in liberated areas controlled by the new Syrian army, it will be necessary to protect them. This is called a buffer zone, adding that they are currently thinking about it and that this matter is very complex and cannot be done without the consent of the Turks and other countries. Fabius said that what they want is to push things forward and bring down the Syrian regime as soon as possible, as well as to find humanitarian solutions at the same time.
Soulever les questions que vous avez soulevées, c'est-à-dire quid de cette possibilité d'un gouvernement alternatif.
The head of the Syrian regime, Bashar al-Assad, said that talking about a buffer zone is not realistic, adding that the situation is better now, but there is a need for more time to resolve the situation on the ground, as he put it. In an interview aired by Al Dunya channel, al-Assad said that he is still in the presidential palace in Damascus, adding that Syria is facing a regional and global battle and more time is needed to resolve it. And the fate of Syria is in the hands of the Syrians, praising what he called heroism of his army. The Communication and Strategy Research Center said that the number of the civilians who were murdered during the revolution reached 29,000 since it started until yesterday. And according to the statistics, 2,211 children were killed, while 2,493 women were killed. 2,493 were military personnel, 974 were tortured to death, and more than 76,000 are still missing. And finally, more than 216,000 are currently detained. And in the meantime, the center said that the number of Syrian refugees who registered exceeded 211,000, distributed all over the neighboring states as follows: more than 211,000 Syrian refugees in neighboring countries, and more than 78,400 refugees in Turkey. More than 64,396 refugees are in Jordan, and more than 53,038 refugees are in Lebanon, and more than 15,898 refugees are in Iraq. On the same issue, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees said that the number of Syrian refugees in Turkey could be up to 100,000 with the escalation of the conflict, in a time when activists confirmed that the number of refugees stranded on the Turkish-Syrian border reached 10,000 people.
At least 10,000 Syrians are currently stranded on the Turkish borders after Ankara closed its crossings and prevented those who are fleeing the horror of Al-Assad massacres and ongoing military operations from entering its territories. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees spoke about the crossing of children without their parents, as well as the wounded and patients who were forced to walk for days to reach a safe point. While on the southern parts in Daraa, the Commissioner confirmed that convoys of refugees heading to Jordan were exposed to artillery bombing and airstrikes. The Commission predicted an increase in the number of refugees in Turkey within the next few days to reach 200,000 refugees, while the Turkish authorities asked for assistance from the United Nations to accommodate the refugees and the establishment of new camps inside the Syrian borders.
insani yardım gönderme çabası.
We are seeking all means to deliver humanitarian aid to the Syrians, and we hope from the United Nations to help in the protection of refugees in Syria, and if it would be possible to set up camps inside Syria.
Whereas in Jordan, particularly in the Zaatari camp, clashes have erupted between the Syrian refugees and Jordanian security forces when the refugees protested against the deteriorating conditions in the camp. Adding to that, activists said that in this desert camp, where the number of refugees reached more than 10,000, the living conditions are unbearable amid scarcity of services and lack of medical care. While some Arab countries, including the United Arab Emirates, established field hospitals equipped with advanced medical equipment for the treatment of refugees in Al-Mafraq province in Jordan. In the meantime, Jordanian government spokesman Minister Samih al-Ma'aita said that the significant increase in the flow of Syrian refugees into the kingdom forces his country to think of all the possibilities, and he added that the number of Syrian refugees who entered Jordan on Monday and Tuesday reached 4,600 refugees.
Al-Assad ongoing atrocities are reaching the whole world, and any human being with just a little bit of sense can see how this nationwide genocide is anything but humane. Jack is a 15-year-old young man from Canada who couldn't sit still and ideally watch humans being terrorized and brutally murdered. So he decided to write a letter to the perpetrator and share his words with the whole world. Let's watch.
Dear President Al-Assad, my name is Jack Hayden. I am 14 years old and I'm from Montreal, Canada. I'm writing you because I feel the things you're doing in Syria are wrong. You probably think I do not have the right to send you a letter about a place I have never been to. I'm not Syrian, I'm not even from the Middle East. But I do have the right to address you as I also live in this world and I have the responsibility to do what I can to make the world a better place to live in for everyone. A place that people can live in without fear. I am bothered that you have refused to let people have the right to protest and express their feelings, refused to let them gather to discuss their futures, arrest people who have different opinions than yours, label Syrian citizens as foreign terrorists if they even raise their voices in opposition to you. I am very disturbed, as every citizen of our planet should be, that you beat, jail, torture, shoot, and kill people, especially people my age who just want to have a normal and free life.
And with us speaking on the line from Montreal, from Canada, is Jack. Jack, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Jack, how did you start writing these letters to Bashar al-Assad, and why?
Basically, I saw it on TV what he was doing and read it in the news, and I really disturbed about it, and I wanted to try and help the people and just try and help. Basically, that's all.
Jack, how did you come to know about the situation in Syria? What is happening to the Syrian people, and especially to young children as your age?
Because the network in Canada, they always had stories on it, and I kept seeing it on TV, on CTV and all that, and I was just sad that he just kills people for no reason.
And Jack, how would you say about the level of awareness among the Canadians, and especially young men as you are, regarding what is happening today in some places in the Middle East, and especially what's happening, the catastrophic crisis that is going on in Syria?
I think people in Canada are really aware because like CBC and CTV and CBC keep showing videos in that, but our Canadian government, I don't think they could do much because like the Syrian, Russia and China are vetoing help and all that. So, but I think that they should just get rid of the veto so we can actually help.
Yes. Jack, did you receive any sort of reaction for your or responses for what you've posted on YouTube?
Yes, I've gotten very positive reactions, like from Syrians and Canadians, basically people from all over the world. Good reactions, and they thanked me for trying to help. Yeah. But I haven't received any reactions from Al-Assad or Russia. So yeah.
Jack, thank you very much for being with us. And dear viewers, before we wrap up, here's another look at today's top stories. Over 100 people die in Syria today, and the bombing targets Eastern Ghouta and Old Homs.
قصف عشوائي على أحياء مدينة حمص.
تفتناز تصاعد أسين الدخان.
The Free Syrian Army destroys many helicopters in Taftanaz airport, and the regime forces bomb residential areas and invade Jericho.
قصف مدينة 29/8/2012.
And Oglu says that his country will discuss housing refugees inside Syria with the United Nations. With this, we do end our news bulletin from Orient TV. For more updates about the Syrian revolution, visit our Facebook page. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.